Welcome into episode 302 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, it is finally here. The postseason is days away. We know the Bruins' first round opponent. Up until game 82, it could have been one of two teams, but the games leading up to that, it could have been a handful of teams. We now know the Boston Bruins are facing off against the Toronto Maple Leafs in round one. Opening shifts, initial thoughts. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't my opening shift, but I just woke up this morning just so excited. Like last night was like a little chaotic. Like there was Jack Edwards announcing his retirement, which I know we're going to touch on at some point. Yeah. And a bunch of stuff came out of Montgomery's pregame, and then like just kind of a crap game from the Bruins until the third period. And you're kind of like, all right, like whatever. Final night of the season. But then I woke up this morning. It's like it's playoff hockey. Like this is like who cares what happened the last two games of the season? This is it. This is the best time of the year. My opening shift is now that we are here, I am rotating goalies at least the first two games. That's how I think the Bruins.
Breaking news! Scott thinks they're going to rotate.
I think they're gonna, and I think they should. I feel like that's how it's been setting up. They rotated all the way right to the end. Never made any effort to give one goalie 2, 3, 4 starts in a row. I've said it before, but Montgomery seemed to hint that they would not rotate to the end and then ride one guy like they did last year. So, yeah, I think at least the first two games you split, and because there's still a debate about who starts game one that we can get into, I will say I'm still going Ullmark because I think he's been the better goalie for the last 2 months. But I do also understand the argument for Swayman because he got the two big wins over Toronto early in March, started both those games, gave up one goal in each of them. Swayman had the better final start of the regular season, if we care about that. He was nails against Washington Monday night. Ullmark, I thought, was a little off Tuesday night against Ottawa. But I would go Ullmark game one, Swayman game two, and evaluate from there.
Hey, Bridget, what am I doing right now?
Keeping your mouth shut. Because we'll talk about it again later. And I can't wait so we're going to record Sunday Skate with Razor after game one.
We're doing 2 hours of who starts game two.
Yeah, it's going to be 2 hours of which goalie should start game two.
If I tell Razor we're doing that, what do you think his reaction? Would he just turn right around and walk out?
He's not going to come in.
So I'm telling you guys right now, this is part of a Brian pact that for my own sanity, I will not be discussing the goaltending situation all playoffs. I'm going to leave that to everybody else. I'm just going to sit back, relax, put my feet up, and watch the madness. I've said my piece, and from here on out, not a word from me. Not a word.
Are you just going to go with the flow?
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to watch it. Yeah.
I'm going to mark this down.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
by game 3, when someone sucks, he's gonna be like, "You need to go back to Swayman."
No. I'm not even gonna entertain it. I'm just gonna watch it all unfold. I'll let the other goalie experts out there.
Everyone's a goalie expert in this town.
Everyone's a goalie expert. So it's a hot topic, and I got nothing left to say. Let the playoffs begin. Let the games begin.
Okay. Well, I do have thoughts on it, but we will save that for later. Scott never changed his opinion on this. Actually, this has been Scott's opinion the whole time, but I gotta give props to Scott. This isn't my opening shift, but
I like this.
So I gotta give props to Scott for being a true journalist yesterday. What did Scott do in the pregame? He asked Montgomery about the two things he said, "Don't ask me about." He asked him, is there an update on Brazeau? Is he still week to week? And he gave Scott a very short yes, week to week. And then he said, and what about the goalie situation? And he was just like, we have two good goalies.
I didn't ask about the goalie situation.
I thought it was you that followed up. Someone followed up with a question about the goalies. It was journalism. That's what I was witnessing pregame. It was asking Monty the things he didn't want anyone to ask him about. But obviously we need to know. So
if it was Scott, it was journalism. If it was potentially other people, Bridget would have said it was annoying. So it just depends on who was asking the question.
It does. No. That's only one specific person, but so I'll get to my opening shift, and mine has to do with this every season. The biggest concern that most teams have is, are we healthy heading into the playoffs? So I want to just kind of set up what the Bruins are dealing with health wise, who might have some concerns, and who's trending in the right direction or who looks good. So, Brazeau, obviously, we didn't get the update. He's week to week. He could be a big asset if he comes back, but it doesn't look like that's going to be soon. It's definitely not going to be for game one. So, Brazeau, we can pretty confidently say, though not confirmed, that he will not be playing game one. In fact, week to week is a designation that I told you already I don't like. It could mean he's not even back for a first round series. So anyway, we haven't seen any positive signs about Brazeau being able to come in, at least not in the first week of the playoffs. So Forbert is playing in Providence. He hasn't played yet, though, right? I think he's playing this weekend. So he's definitely someone that it was not on people's radar that he was going to have a chance to make it back in the playoffs. And now he's playing in the AHL, which is really only a short step away from coming back. And we can give our opinions about whether or not he should crack the lineup, like what that might look like. But he might actually be an option at some point during the playoffs. Brendan Carlo didn't play the last game. Pat Maroon didn't play the last game. They said both of those were maintenance / rest. They got the 2 games out of Maroon that they wanted. They didn't think that he needed to play the last game of the regular season against Ottawa. I can't tell whether or not I'm concerned about that. And then Carlo is really the one that if you lose him, you're in trouble. But the update from Monty pregame was just maintenance. Hopefully that is not BS for the Bruins' sake, because they need Carlo for a playoff run. He's going to be really important.
A couple of days ago, or maybe it was yesterday actually, on Twitter, we put out a poll that had a good amount of feedback. Basically, it was asking, who do fans prefer the Bruins play in the first round, Tampa Bay or Toronto? At the time, those are the 2 options. Obviously, since then, we now know it's Toronto. And 60% of voters were in favor of playing the Maple Leafs in the first round over Tampa Bay. And I would be one of those people as well. I think the Toronto matchup is favorable to the Bruins over Tampa in certain aspects, though we're going to dive into everything, and maybe it isn't so obvious that that's the case. But in any event, I was one of those individuals who kind of took a little bit of because the Bruins might be Toronto's boogeyman, but Tampa is Boston's boogeyman. And so for those reasons, it's a good thing. But my opening shift is, it's a caution to the wind to fans and to the Bruins, which is not that the Bruins would do this, but for fans, don't rely on history. Don't think that this is going to be a sure thing Boston playoff series win, because the Bruins beat them 11 years ago and the Bruins beat them 6 years ago and 5 years ago, whatever it's been. Because right now the Bruins only have 5 players or 7 players remaining from the last time they played, which is McAvoy, Marchand, Pasternak, DeBrusk, Carlo, and Grzelcyk. And Toronto only has 5 players remaining from the last time they played, which is their core 4, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, and then Morgan Riley. So there's a lot of individuals, including and the head coaches are different. There's no Mike Babcock. There's no Bruce Cassidy. There's not a lot remaining from the last time these teams played. So the whole aura of Boston versus Toronto, most of the individuals taking part in this playoff series have nothing to do with the past. No Maple Leafs, outside of those guys I just mentioned, have any memory of losing to the Bruins in the playoffs, and no Bruins, aside from those I mentioned, have any memory of beating the Leafs in the playoffs. I think this year's playoff series is interesting because I think, and we'll get to predictions later on in the podcast, but I think this is the best version, the most complete version of the Toronto Maple Leafs that the Bruins have seen in the playoffs. of the last 11 years. I think that Toronto still has the offense they posed in prior series, but I think they're bigger and stronger and tougher than any of the Leafs teams we've seen in the last 10 years in the playoffs against Boston. And on the flip side, I think that this is probably on paper the weakest Bruins team that we've seen go up against Toronto in a playoff series. With that said, it took the Bruins 7 games the prior 3 times to beat Toronto. So I don't understand where everybody thinks is going to be an easy cakewalk of a series for Boston, but that's my opening shift, is just not to rely on history here. There's a lot of analytics numbers we'll get into that support that.
Yeah, there's no Nazem Kadri to get suspended and ruin the series for Toronto this time. He is long gone. He did do that in both 2018 and 2019, if people remember.
I know Toronto fans remember.
Yeah. But those are, like, you talk about it's only a handful of guys on each team, but those are the core guys. Like, those are the guys you lean on in the series. So that DNA for those guys is still there. And I think with Toronto, it's not just like their history against the Bruins. It's also series that have happened between 2019 and now, where they choked against Columbus in the bubble, and then they choked against the Canadiens the next year in the All-Canadian Division season that they should have really cakewalked through because they were the only good Canadian team that year, and they still choked in the first round. And then they blew a 3-2 lead to the Lightning the next year. And then they finally get over the hump against the Lightning in the first round last year, but then get blown out by the Panthers in 5 games. So, that stuff is all real. And you don't have to go deep into Toronto media to find it. It's, the questions and the criticism of that core in Toronto is front and center and very much still present. And, for good reason. Like, some of those core guys up there have really struggled in the playoffs. That second round series against Florida last year, Austin Matthews, 0 goals. John Tavares, 0 goals. Mitch Marner, I think, had 1. William Nylander was the only one who even kind of showed up. Like that, and this playoff series before that, where you can look at those guys being quiet. So I do understand the, hey, give me Toronto, because that's, they choke in the playoffs every year. But as we're going to get into, I do agree with Brian that this is a different, stronger Toronto team that presents a lot of challenges and absolutely should not be taken lightly.
Yeah, and I think there's recency bias to answer your question about why people might be so confident that the Bruins can beat Toronto in this series. It has to do with the regular season statistics and what the Bruins were able to do. Sweeping a 4-game regular season series with Toronto seems pretty impressive, considering the season that Austin Matthews is having, and it was a 97-point season for Nylander, and Marner had 85 points. Like, this is a team with good offensive firepower that the Bruins, like you mentioned, Swayman held them to 1 goal in those last 2 games of the regular season series. So you're looking at what the Bruins did. They put up four goals in each of the last 3 games against Toronto. So you watched Boston's offense be able to break down some of the flaws, or expose some of the flaws that Toronto has on defense in net. So that's why, even though you look at Toronto on paper and you look at what they've been able to do individually this season, and they're always going to be a tough team in the playoffs to beat for anyone. I know that they haven't won a lot of series, but they're still, it's like, you don't even know how they haven't won those, because they've been good. I think that a lot of the confidence among Boston fans comes from watching them beat them in close games, right? The first 2 games they played was a shootout win, which obviously there's no shootout in the playoffs, and then the second one of the season was a 4-3 overtime win where Marchand came up with a clutch goal. And I think there's confidence that Boston's clutch players can be clutch in the playoffs, whereas Toronto's best players aren't necessarily clutch in the playoffs. So you feel like the Bruins might get an edge in that category. And that the goaltending is an edge, and those are two really important things. So that's where I think confidence comes from among the Boston fan base.
Okay, so let me start off with a simple question here because, again, there's a lot to get into. But again, let's just simple question. Maybe this helps when we break up the episode into segments. Bridget and Scott, who has the best player in the series, Boston or Toronto?
Toronto.
Boston.
Austin Matthews is a 200-foot unicorn. Like his offensive dominance and goal scoring ability, the elite shot to score from distance, as well as the drive and willingness to get to the net front. Only Zach Hyman had more individual high danger chances than Austin Matthews this season. And Hyman's getting those because Connor McDavid's setting him up for him. Austin Matthews gets those because he creates them himself and he goes to those areas. He's also a very good defensive center. He's going to get Selke Trophy votes this year. He's gotten Selke Trophy votes in past seasons. I love David Pastrnak. He is a superstar as well. But Austin Matthews' total game, to me, elevates him above Pastrnak.
I was being a little facetious because Pasternak's a great player. But Austin Matthews, like you said, makes not that Pastrnak doesn't, but more frequently, Austin Matthews can make something out of nothing, and set himself up, and always seems to get that bounce and have the puck and go to the right areas of the ice. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see who in the playoffs performs better, because in the past, and I know there's been a narrative that is, you can prove it wrong pretty quickly, that Pastrnak is not a good playoff performer. Austin Matthews is going to have to be good. He's going to have to be the best player in the series if Toronto wants to win. I think they're going to have to rely on him. And where he's really dangerous and where I don't like to see him set up is when he's got all that time and space on the power play. I mean, he's someone you do not want to see with the puck on his stick on the power play, but he's going to have it a lot because that's one of their best looks, one of their best scoring options. So take that away from him. Don't take so many penalties and don't give him so much time and space.
I'm more worried about him 5-on-5, honestly. Like he's an absolute freak at 5-on-5. That their power play, like the Bruins, has actually been awful down the stretch. Like that. Now there was also a stretch earlier this season when I think it was like a 15-game stretch where they were 50% or like something insane. So obviously they are capable of that. But they've also really struggled on the power play down the stretch. Matthews, though, 51 even strength goals this year. That's the most since Teemu Selanne in 92-93. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's – look, we can be the biggest David Pastrnak fans in the world. I think to not call a centerman with 70 goals in the season, not the best player in a series, is a little bit disingenuous. I also think that Matthews' ability to create something out of nothing, like you mentioned, Bridget, it's not that Pastrnak can't or doesn't. I just think, I mean, you're talking about two of the best goal scorers in the world, quite frankly. So but yeah, I think Matthews, but to Bridget, to your statement about Matthews having to be Toronto's best player, I actually think Toronto's better off. I think I like Toronto's chances of winning a series better if Matthews doesn't perform versus Pastrnak not performing, based on the at least offensively, based on the supporting cast. I mean, if Matthews goes quiet, and what's quiet for Matthews, maybe 5 points in 7 games or something like that. If he goes quiet, okay, Toronto has Nylander, Marner, Tavares, Bertuzzi, the others to potentially get that secondary scoring. If Pastrnak goes quiet, you're really leaning on Marchand and then Coyle and Zacha and DeBrusker. It's a little bit more. There's a little bit more of a leash, I think, there for Matthews for Toronto beyond Matthews offensively. But okay, so that's the best player in the series. So,
by the way, sorry, Brian, before you move on, we should note for people listening, we're recording this Wednesday afternoon. Toronto does actually have one more game left Wednesday night. So he had 69 goals going in. So if you're listening, you will know if he got to 70 or not.
Right.
But either way, even 69 would be the most since Mario Lemieux in 95-96. So
right, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Do the Bruins have the best defenseman in the series? Do they have the two best defensemen in the series? Is Morgan Rielly's sandwich between McAvoy and Lindholm, or is Lindholm better than Rielly, would you say? Because again, Toronto, if you're analyzing this series, no one's going to convince anybody that the Bruins have a better offensive lineup, top to bottom, than Toronto. Toronto has the edge offensively. Where the Bruins are going to win this series is a lot of areas, but they're going to have their best defenseman be their best defenseman, because defensively the Bruins are better than Toronto in that and on the blue line. So again, I ask, just to reset it, do the Bruins have the two best defensemen in the series?
As in McAvoy, Lindholm?
Mm-hmm.
I think you could argue that.
I think when Lindholm is at his best, I would take him over Rielly. But if we're talking about who had a better season this year, I would have to say Rielly. Just he does have 58 points. Like that's really good. Can't ignore that. Rielly is not very good defensively. There's no question about it. Like you can expose him. Lindholm, even in a down offensive season, for the most part, has played pretty good defense. So different kinds of players. Push comes to shove, I'd rather have Hampus Lindholm, but Rielly's had a better season, I think.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I meant to ask if the Bruins have the top three defensemen. I forgot about Wotherspoon.
I thought you were going to say new PP1 quarterback Kevin Shattenkirk.
Right.
Which we will get to be getting to that as well. But
yeah. So I would say, and what I thought your question was more about was like defensively, was like that side of the puck.
Yeah, I guess just overall as a player. But
okay, maybe overall makes it different. Obviously, there's a huge difference between point numbers in Morgan Rielly and Hampus Lindholm. But defensively, I like Lindholm better. Defensively, I like Carlo better. Overall player. Obviously, offense from Rielly this season has really contributed to success. So, two different answers for depending on what you mean for that.
Right. That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so now we can start to get into it a little bit more analytically. I think maybe the best way to ask this to you guys, we can kind of go from here, is what would you label the key to the series? Maybe for both teams, but if you want to keep it to the Bruins, I suppose, what's the key to the series for the Bruins here heading into game one?
Slowing down Austin Matthews. You're not going to shut him down. First, if you do, it might be a short series. That would be fantastic. But slowing him down, just finding a way to somehow limit his chances, keep him off the scoreboard. Don't let him take over the series. So whether that's defensively matching up against him or getting big saves from your goalies. Matthews scored a little over 23% of all of Toronto's goals this season. The highest percentage of any one player to his team by quite a bit. So yes, there are obviously other weapons if even if you do keep him quiet. We mentioned them: Marner, Nylander, John Tavares. Not what he was in his prime, but still a very good player. But so much of what they do centers around Matthews. And, I looked over the games this year, looked at how the Bruins matched up, and everyone kind of saw Matthews a little bit. Like, they didn't stick strictly to matchups. But the one matchup that stood out to me in terms of someone who did well against him was Brandon Carlo. When Carlo went up against Matthews this year, and it was about 31 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time, shots were even, goals were 1-1, scoring chances were even, and the Bruins actually had an 8-3 advantage in high danger chances. When Brandon Carlo was on the ice against Austin Matthews, the Bruins really did a good job of limiting his high danger chances. So I would look for that matchup, especially on home ice early in the series. I think you'll probably see a lot of the Marchand, Coyle, DeBrusk line against Matthews as well. That's the Bruins' strongest defensive line. So again, you're not going to completely keep him off the board. He's going to get his chances, but doing as much as you can to limit them.
Yeah, that Marchand matchup is what they go to against offensive, like forward wise, is what they go to. The good news for the Bruins too, as long as Carlo's healthy, like we talked about, he left the second to last game, didn't come back, and then didn't play against Ottawa. So there's a little bit of concern there about his health. They said Montgomery, like I said, if it's all honest, it was just maintenance. But that's why I say if you're missing Carlo, it's such a huge loss. But the good news is, let's just assume that it's true. It's just a maintenance day. Carlo's in game one. Carlo's healthy for the series. There's a lot of different defensive partners you could go to for Carlo in terms of shutting down Matthews. Like we've seen Lindholm Carlo, we've seen Wotherspoon Carlo, we've seen, and obviously we don't know about Lorai's availability. We've seen Lorai Carlo, but I feel like the two best options there, if you're not, which we do think that Lindholm McAvoy probably is the starting top pair, but
I disagree.
You think they're going to go back to Lindholm Carlo to shut down?
Yeah, in this matchup specifically, I'd put Carlo with Lindholm and match them up against the Matthews line.
Honestly, that is the most logical or like defensive strategy if you're trying to really cover your bases with Matthews, because I think Montgomery said something about this earlier in the season. He played a short bench. I know at least one of those Toronto games because it's all about covering the top nine, like the top six, really. Like you want to use your best personnel against them, and so Lindholm Carlo is that shutdown pair the Bruins were using most of the season. They went away from it over the last, say, like 2.5 weeks, but it's a good shutdown pair. And I don't know what the numbers are for Wotherspoon Carlo. That was something we saw a little bit of. Wotherspoon brings something completely different than Lindholm does. So, and then that brings up the question: is it you go back to Grzelcyk McAvoy as the quote unquote top pair?
Well, I think that's definitely what they would do. And where it gets interesting is because I agree with Scott's philosophy where you should probably split up McAvoy and Lindholm. By the way, McAvoy sidebar, but he needs to, flip that switch pretty quickly in the playoffs because I don't think he's been playing his greatest hockey, to say the least, as of late. But when McAvoy's going, when Lindholm's going, I think it's best to split them up to have one of them on the ice against Toronto's depth. When I say depth, I mean high-end depth. So yeah, Lindholm with Carlo, Grzelcyk with McAvoy. But then now you have a question, right? Do you want to go with Peak Wotherspoon as the third D pair, which we all have vocalized we like that pair, especially if they were to play a Tampa or a Florida series at some point or a Carolina series, it's a little bit heavier and nastier. But if you go Peak Wotherspoon, where does Kevin Shattenkirk figure in? Because the top power play unit, McAvoy's been struggling. Shattenkirk's making it cook a little bit. So I could potentially see a scenario where maybe Wotherspoon is a healthy scratch to start, or where so that Shattenkirk can get that power play time, or maybe Monty gives McAvoy a new lease on life. It's the postseason. Get it in gear now, or else game 2, Shatty's coming in, and maybe he keeps that Peak Wotherspoon pair for game 1. I don't know. What would you guys do? How would you line up your top 6 to start this series?
I think I put Grzelcyk with McAvoy because there's a comfort level there. They've had some better games, obviously not recently because we saw a lot of McAvoy Lindholm, but prior to that, I thought Grizzly had started to turn a corner. I wouldn't have an especially long leash there. Like if Grizzly struggles, then I could be okay with taking him out of the lineup as early as game 2. But I would start that way, and then I would have Wotherspoon out to start, and I would have Shattenkirk in with Peak, which I think has also been a pretty good pairing. It's not obviously not as defensively stout as Wotherspoon and Peak together, but the reason I have Shattenkirk in there is I am starting the series with him as my quarterback on the top power play unit. That looked so much better Tuesday night than anything we have seen from the Bruins top power play unit in, I don't know, a month and a half. Like the top unit had been so slow and stationary and not getting shots through and not getting PKs moving. And then you put Shattenkirk back there in one game, 2 power plays, you see so much better movement and shots getting through and a goal. And it's like, oh, okay, like this actually isn't all that complicated. You know, you just had guys out there who were overcomplicating it, and Shattenkirk doesn't. He is very kind of simplified, straightforward, just consistently makes the right play and like gets, you know, it's not like he's like running around crazy out there on the power play. It's just subtle movement that gets people moving and opens up shooting lanes or passing lanes. He has a pretty good connection with Pasternak too. So that to me works. And, you know, the Leafs penalty kill has struggled all year. So you like that can be a difference maker in this series. I'm not taking any chances. I'm going with what to me looked good most recently, and that is having Shattenkirk there.
Yeah, he's a quicker playmaker up at the point than McAvoy because, like you said, it looked like McAvoy might have been overthinking. All right, taking his time a little bit to decide what the pass was, whereas Shattenkirk was kind of just reacting to what he saw, like bang, bang. I see Pasternak's open at this exact moment. I'm gonna just tap pass it over there. It moved faster because I think at least facilitating when the puck came to him, he was just making the quick read and moving the puck there. And I think it helped. My question's to both of you, but because Scott, you mentioned a short leash for Grzelcyk. If you take Grzelcyk out, but you want to keep the Lindholm-Carlo pair, what do you do with McAvoy at that point? It's not an option, really.
I'll give it a shot. I'll try it. No,
you're gonna go in for we want the McLaughlin McAvoy pair.
Yeah, I can simplify. No, if you do that, you probably have to put Lindholm back with McAvoy. I don't think anything else really makes all that much sense. You know, unless Lohrei was coming back and you put him there, but obviously he's gonna get called back up first. So we'll see if that happens. Yeah. But otherwise, you're probably putting Lindholm with him, and then going Wotherspoon, Carlo, maybe.
Yeah. It's just something to think about.
Just want to make a quick correction on something I said earlier. There's 8 players remaining from the Bruins from their last playoff series, not 7. I forgot about Heinen, probably because he was traded and bounced around a couple of times, so he hasn't been here the whole time since then, but he is technically a player that was in that 19 series that is back with the Bruins. So there's 8 players remaining for the Bruins. But so a couple of keys for me to the series, which kind of are influenced by what we were just talking about. I think defensively, I just think that the Bruins have to play. They have to play tough in general as a team, but they have to be really especially hard on Toronto's top players, Matthews, Nylander, Marner. They certainly don't love fighting through checks. So slowing them down, I think you have to play that style against them. But a big key for me, guys, is special teams. And they say that ideally, and I say ideally with quotations because the Bruins in 2011 had a pretty porous power play, but ideally you want to have a top 10 PK and PP. Well, the Bruins have the 13th best power play in the National Hockey League at season's end, and 7th best penalty kill. So 7th on the PK, top 10, 13th on the power play, just outside top 10. Okay, they're flirting with it, right? But certainly the power play needs improvement, and a big reason why they're 13th is because they've been struggling so far or so much the last quarter of the season. Toronto on the power play, they're 7th. Talent-wise, they should be higher than that. I don't know about you guys, but every time Toronto's on the power play with that talent, it's one of those times where you're just holding your breath. No matter who has the puck on their stick, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, Riley, something can happen at any moment. Where Toronto falters is the penalty kill, they're 22nd. So looking at a Bruins team that's struggled on the power play, Toronto seems like a good team to match up against in the first round, to have that new lease on life in the postseason. It's like a new season. But also Toronto, they have holes in their game defensively. And I talked about off the top how don't rely on history. But the fact of the matter is, Scott, your counter to that, or not counter, but just a point you made, is it does matter with the core players, right? These core players do have that experience against each other. And David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, they feel good with the puck on their stick when they're playing Toronto. They just do. They're able to create offense against this team. Now, I think you have, what's the guy's name? Benoit. What's his first name with Toronto?
Simone Benoit.
Simone Benoit, Joel Edmondson. Those are defensemen that present something that gives guys like Pastrnak trouble, length and physicality. So again, this Toronto team is different than what we've seen in the past. But that said, I think the Bruins, especially on the power play, they can feel confident with the puck on their stick to make things happen. And I just think that you can't have a Bruins Maple Leaf series with the high-end talent that both teams possess and not think special teams is going to have a big factor.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're the Bruins, you might need your power play to make up some offense, because if it's just a 5-on-5 series and everyone's special teams struggle, well, the Maple Leafs have been a better 5-on-5 offense this season. They are tied with the Avalanche in 5-on-5 scoring for the season, first in the NHL. Since the All-Star break, the Leafs are first in 5-on-5 scoring, first in overall scoring, all on their own. Number 2 in 5-on-5 goal differential since the All-Star break, behind only Edmonton. Bruins on the season are a really good 5-on-5 team. They're 4th overall in 5-on-5 goal differential. But since the All-Star break, it's been not as good. They're 15th. I think they're just plus 9 since the All-Star break at 5-on-5, I believe. So again, that's more like middle of the pack. So, if it stays 5 on, this is where I feel like I was in the minority in actually preferring Tampa as a first round opponent, because Tampa has not been a good 5-on-5 team. And I would have felt like, listen, as long as you can keep it 5-on-5 for the most part and don't give Tampa's power play too many chances, I would have liked the Bruins' odds. Toronto is a tougher 5-on-5 matchup. So you're going to need your goaltending to step up big time. You're going to need Ilya Samsonov or whoever Toronto puts in net to not stand on his head, which, I know we'll probably get to goaltending, but that should be advantage Bruins. Should be. Of course, it should have been advantage Bruins last year in the playoffs, and it wasn't. But yeah, if you're breaking even 5-on-5 or even slightly losing that, then you're gonna have to make up ground on special teams. So absolutely, Bruins power play has to, it doesn't have to be 50% for the series, but you're gonna have to score, a couple big goals or two on the man advantage.
Yeah, and just looking back at the special teams matchup in the regular season, the Bruins did win the regular season matchup there because they had 3 power play goals. It was Pastrnak, Geekie, and Zacha, and Mitch Marner had Toronto's 1. So it was an advantage for Boston in the regular season. Now, obviously, working with Razor now, I hear him in the back of my mind occasionally, regular season stats don't matter. But what else are we supposed to go off, right? So in the regular season, that's the Bruins did win that
Well,
battle. And by the way, those were all three of the Bruins goals came in their last two games, power play goals, I should say, came in their last two games against Toronto, not the first two games. The first two games, neither team really got a lot of power plays, and neither team got a power play goal in the first two meetings. But in the two games in March, the Bruins scored 3 power play goals through that.
And Bridget, I want to address something, because on Sunday's skate, you asked Razor this question, and you were kind of asking on behalf of listeners and fans, and maybe a little bit for yourself as well. But you asked him pretty much like, can you learn anything? Can you take anything away from a season series against an opponent heading into the playoffs? And Razor was quick to kind of say, no, it's a new season. You can't throw it all away. And I agree, but I disagree at the same time. I agree in the sense where the results don't matter, right? Whoever won the regular season series, I don't believe that matters at all. So I agree with Razor on that standpoint. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. Throw it out the window. What I do think, and I'm not saying Razor didn't think of this, or I just think it may be something that he wasn't thinking of in the moment, but I do think you can learn something from a season series against a team based on like system play. Like, you do look back on film, and you know how what's their neutral zone coverage, what's their forecheck, what's their penalty kill, what are they doing, how do they play when they're down, how do they play with a lead, different special teams, obviously formats and setups. So are they disciplined, right? Do they take stupid penalties, whatever. So you can learn from those games, right, and study the team, which is, I'm sure, what both coaching staffs are doing right now. But as far as the results of those games, that doesn't matter. But I do think both teams can learn from how the other team plays, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be useless for all of us going through this exercise of doing our series previews if like we couldn't glean anything at all from what happened in the regular season. And I think well, I want to get to this now, because this was a key thing in those most two recent meetings was goaltending and how well Swayman played, which can kind of lead into our talk about goaltending and how the Bruins match up with Toronto in that category.
Yeah, well, it should be favorably, right? I mean, Ullmark and Swayman still two of, conservatively, the 10 best goalies in the NHL. So no matter who's in there, you expect good goaltending no matter how they approach it. And Toronto has the same goaltending question that they seemingly always have. Like, just change the names every couple of years. It's always the same. Last year in the playoffs, Ilya Samsonov. So Ilya Samsonov had a good season last year, and then a good first round against Tampa, and Toronto wins that series. Then he craps the bed against Florida, gets yanked. They turn to Joe Woll, who ended up being pretty solid in that series. But obviously Toronto still loses it anyways. Toronto comes into this year. Ilya Samsonov's supposed to be the number one. He has an .890 save percentage. That is bad. All the advanced analytics for goalies suggest that he has cost the Maple Leafs goals. He is in like goals save above expected. Ullmark and Swayman, two of the guys near the top of the league. Samsonov is a minus, meaning he has let in more goals than you would expect a league average goalie to let in. In like the same situation. That takes into account number of chances you face, quality of chances, takes all that into account. So he hasn't been good. At times it looked like Woll might run with their starting job. Martin Jones got some games for them at one point. Jones is out of
21 games.
Yeah, he seems to be out of the picture. He hasn't played in almost a month.
Yeah.
Joe Woll has struggled since the All-Star break. They've at least won games that Samsonov has started. I think he's like 14-5-1 in his last 20, but he still has a save percentage under 900 in those games. So they're not winning because of him. They're winning because their offense has been on fire and they've outscored their issues at the other end. Yeah, it should be a big edge for the Bruins. Like, that could very easily be the deciding factor. You could see the Leafs getting the better chances, being better 5-on-5 team, but Bruins getting the saves, Samsonov stinking, possibly even going to Woll at some point, and that being the difference.
Yeah, if you look at their last 5 games, Toronto lost 3 of their last 5, and each of those, or I should say, 3 of the last 5 games that Woll started, he gave up 4 or more. And when you look at Samsonov, he's got an above 3 goals against average. Yeah, it's not good, but he's still getting more of the usage. In his second to last game of the regular season, he gave up 6 goals in a loss against New Jersey, and then gave up 5 yesterday. So, yeah, no, not good. Or not yesterday. In his last start, he gave up 5. So, yeah, not the best numbers for him. You never, as a goalie, want to have above 3 goals against average.
So I want to get your pulse, each of you, on the offense and how you. Yeah, go ahead.
I will just mention one last thing on goaltending. The Leafs also currently have Matt Murray on a conditioning loan in the AHL. He hasn't played in over a year. Had double hip surgery before the season. Missed the entire regular season. But just like, we look at Forward being down in the AHL playing games and say, well, I guess there's a chance he comes back. I guess there's a chance you could see Matt Murray. Like, I guess you can't rule that out. But his game had really fallen off in recent years anyway, so that wouldn't be anything that scares me, just something to put on people's radar.
That Bruins might want to see it.
Yeah.
If you're desperate enough to have to go there in this series, the Bruins probably already have it. They're a pretty decent advantage. Yeah. So also, before we get off the goalies, do you take into account, or I should say, obviously you take it into account, but how much weight do you give to the fact that Swayman played so well against Toronto in the regular season? Is that enough, even though he hasn't played as well as Ullmark in the last month or since the All-Star break, which is even longer than that? How much does that matter?
I mean, if it really shouldn't, if you do what Scott's suggesting, which is they're both playing in the first 2 games, doesn't really matter, I suppose. But I don't know if you can do this because both goalies are going to want to say they want to play. But perhaps if their relationship is so strong and they're so confident in their ability as a tandem, maybe you can have some sort of conversation with goalie Bob and Jim Montgomery and both goaltenders and talk about it. Like, I don't see Ullmark saying, yeah, give Jeremy the net for game 1, right? Like, they both want that.
No, it's going to be told to them, not discussed with them.
Yeah, I know. And yeah, I know. I guess I just painted an unrealistic scenario. But
that was like a happy, friendly scenario of let's just do what's best for.
Well, here's the thing though. I'm not really sure. I guess my answer is does it matter? If you're gonna do what Scott is suggesting, does it really matter? Like, oh well, let's pick the right guy to set the tone, but then we're gonna go to the next guy. So I don't know.
I guess it doesn't if you're genuinely going to rotate them through the first 4 games, which Montgomery has brought up on his own, put the 4-game timeline on it. And also post-game yesterday, Ullmark was asked about, have you been approached about what's going to happen in the playoffs yet? He said no. It hasn't been spoken about yet as of the last game of the regular season, which is not shocking. That's
and Montgomery basically straight up told us that he's not going to tell us a starter ahead of time. Now I'll be interested to see
he's sick of us.
Saturday morning skate. Do we get it, or does he legitimately keep it close to the vest and we find out whoever hits the ice first for warm-ups Saturday around 7:30 p.m. Like that? I feel like that's the most likely time where we find out. Like, I don't think they're going to tell us ahead of time.
Scott will be frantically tweeting.
Indeed.
From as soon as someone steps onto the ice, as soon as the goalie comes out of the tunnel, Scott will be right there tweeting out.
To answer your question though, where it matters for me is I would say that the combination of Swayman's success against Toronto and a very good final start of the regular season in Washington just makes me feel better about Swayman and makes me okay using him early in the series, whether it's game 1 or game 2. Because I will say, like, if Swayman had a rough final start, or if he didn't have that history against Toronto, I would be sitting here being like, do you just ride Allmark? Like, boy, Swayman really hasn't sold me on it.
Change your opinion completely.
Well, if Swayman struggled down the stretch and hadn't been good against Toronto, like, wouldn't you have to consider that? Like, why would you feel confident in Swayman going into the playoffs? So I would say those two things, success against Toronto and a very good final start, just gives me more confidence in Swayman and makes me okay with using him in 1 or 2 or beyond that if he plays well.
Yeah, I mean, just let it be known, I'm not the one asking the goalie questions, and I'm not the one continuing the conversation. So I'm sure I'll be the one that's pinned for always talking about the goalies. But I didn't create this monster.
Are you talking about the one tweet you got this week?
Yeah.
It's my least favorite part of the.
I feel like I don't even bring it up the goalies. I don't start shit, Bridget. I just finish it, you know. But but as far as starting stuff, the offense. So I think we can probably save ourselves a little bit of time. We all kind of agree the top 2 lines would be Pastrnak, Zacha, Heinen, Marchand, Coyle, and DeBrusk, right? So the bottom 2 lines, guys, who's your scratch up front to begin, and how would you line up those bottom 2 lines?
All right, here, Bridget knows this because I predicted it pregame.
I was going to bring it up.
But I still feel this way after the game.
Really?
So pregame, I predicted that James Van Riemsdyk was going to have multiple points last night and win back his third line job. Now, he did not have any points, but I do think he earned game 1 spot as third line left wing. I thought Van Riemsdyk played in a game where very few Bruins did. I thought he played really well against Ottawa. And I thought that line of him, Geeky, and Frederick was the Bruins' best line. They created several good scoring chances, just couldn't bury them. But no one else has really clicked in that spot. So that was enough to set, like, that's been their best third line this year. Obviously, it had just been a long time since we saw it, but I'm gonna trust, at least for the first game, and then we can go from there, the veteran Van Riemsdyk to raise his game, to meet the ask, to be a fit on that line. By the way, facing one of his former teams, I'm putting him on the third line. Fourth line, I will go Lauko, Boqvist, Maroon.
Which leaves out Beecher.
Yeah, and Beecher got sent down. And I'm guessing he gets called back up before Saturday, but
just check in right after the podcast and see.
Yeah,
it'll probably go up right after.
He was at Providence Bruins practice on Wednesday, so that wasn't just a lot of people thought that's just a paper move where, oh, okay, you have to send him down because you want to reward Jason Magna, who's a 34-year-old who has had a very good season in Providence. You get him into the final game. It seems like it was at least a little bit more than just a paper transaction, and I do think Beecher has had a couple tough games recently, so he could very easily get back in, but for right now, he would be my game 1 scratch.
Yeah, I mean, I think Boqvist is a lock. I think Maroon, obviously, you traded for him. He's going to be on your fourth line to start game 1. And Lauko has been playing well. I think I've liked his game. He's kind of like a mosquito. He's just all over. Like, he's just all over whoever has the puck. He's yeah, there you go, Ryan. There he is, as Lauko has gotten your room. But yeah, he's been a pest in terms of not giving anyone space. That's what he does best. I thought he's had a good last stretch. And so I agree with you on that. I was making fun of Scott yesterday when JVR didn't have any points. He started talking to me about expected points, and he was blaming Geeky and everybody under the sun for the fact that Van Riemsdyk didn't have a point because they couldn't finish. But
he had 4 almost points, so I feel like that's the equivalent of 2 real points.
Did they keep track of expected points instead of expected goals?
I don't know.
It feels like a bit of a step
not publicly. Not that I know of. Not anything I have access to.
Yeah, no, that's too advanced for even the advanced stats. But he didn't play bad, right? He provides a veteran presence in the bottom 6, which is another pro. That's a big line with him, Geeky, and Frederick. It's an imposing line. It's a line that gets pucks to the net a lot. And if you have Van Riemsdyk doing his thing, taking away the goalie's eyes net front, you could see it being successful. As long as Van Riemsdyk is more of what we saw in the beginning of the season, or even the middle of the season, than the last month, might even be a little bit more than a month now, that he's seen time healthy scratched because for one reason or another, or even sometimes unhealthy scratched when he was sick. So he's going to look more like the other version of him that we saw earlier in the season.
So I like what you suggested, Scott. I think I don't want Jacob Lauko on the 3rd line. I just don't. I want him on the 4th line, if anything. And then Maroon, it's like he's played 2 games. So it's tough to put him on the 3rd line with Geeky and Frederick because they're sitting there saying, well, we haven't worked with this guy all year. Good guy in the room. And I know Frederick loves Maroon personally. Like, he looks up to him, but they haven't gained that on-ice chemistry yet. So I think what you said about Van Riemsdyk is I agree with, right? I think there's an opportunity there for him to bounce back here. And then as far as the 4th line, yeah, I would scratch Beecher as of right now based on, I think Lauko, yeah, Bridget put it best. He's a pest, he's a mosquito, and I think that's useful this time of year, and he has speed to keep up with Toronto. What I will say is, if Lauko, my biggest gripe with Lauko is I'm just kidding. My biggest
Was that a joke because he eats grapes before the game, or did you accidentally just like?
Oh no, of course that was on purpose. I knew that would get you guys giggling. But my biggest gripe with Lauko is that he doesn't make a lot of great plays with the puck on his stick. And so, if Lauko struggles to really do what he does best, he's certainly not making plays. So if he's not bringing the energy and the physicality, and the Bruins decide to go with Beecher, and Beecher's not really bringing much of anything either, a wild card option I wouldn't mind seeing on that 4th line is maybe Anthony Richard with Boquist, because I think that Richard has the ability, skill-wise, to make plays, to make those give-and-go passes in the D zone, break out into the neutral zone. I think he's good in the offensive zone. And so I could see a Boquist, Richard, Maroon 4th line. I think it would I think it would probably take the Bruins a bit of convincing and poor play from other players to do that. I think that's unfortunate. I think I would kind of like to see that, but I just think that there's guys in front of them for one reason or the other.
Yeah, and let's remember, because with Anthony Richard, he played pretty well when he was up here, and I think we all kind of felt like when he got sent down, it wasn't so much that he had like earned a demotion or wasn't doing his job. It was he was at 9 games played. If he got to 10, he would have needed to clear waivers if he got sent back down after that. The trade deadline was coming up. So I remember making this point at the time, but it was like, well, that seems like a roster flexibility thing, right? Like, okay, send Richard down now while there's no consequences, and then see what our roster looks like after the deadline. Maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't, but you don't have to worry about that waiver situation. Well, now that all goes out the window in the playoffs. Like, now Cap's gone, like all that. So you don't have to worry about that. So he could definitely be back. It is an option for sure.
Yeah, he's probably someone people forgot about because he got sent down very end of February. So it's been a while since we've seen him on the ice. But also it coincided with Brazeau coming up. And it was like, okay, we're gonna give Brazeau a chance. We're gonna send Richard down now, and it made sense roster wise, like you mentioned, Scott. But also had to do with the fact that Brazeau, when he did come in, started playing well, and he earned his spot. And so that's where we were in terms of that. This just popped in my head, and it's probably not a thing. How many games did Brazeau play with the Bruins this season so far? I don't have it in front of me right now, but
I feel like it was around maybe 15 to 20. By the way, yeah, all my commentary in the forward lines, obviously same as you guys. This is going under the impression that he's not healthy to start.
Yeah. 19 games for Brazeau.
19 games. So yeah. If Brazeau hadn't played so well, maybe they do, I don't know, extend him. But like you mentioned, it's a tricky thing with the 10-game situation where they got to clear waivers after that. So that hurts guys who have come up. They get sent down quicker than maybe they would otherwise because they don't want to deal with the waiver stuff. But it's good that you brought that up, Brian. I don't know how likely that is or how likely, because we were talking too about Megna. I don't think he's really going to be playing in the playoffs. It was more of a pat on the back for a good season in the AHL kind of situation. So I don't think that's going to be happening, but
yeah, one other point I'll make that, potentially works in Beecher's favor. Toronto's a very good faceoff team, 4th in the NHL this season, 53.5%. And as we know, Bruins have not been great on faceoffs, 21st at 49.5%. Obviously, Beecher is good on faceoffs, so that, you could definitely see a situation where the Bruins are like, all right, we need another faceoff guy in, someone who can win some draws, and Beecher gets back in that way. Obviously, that's always been part of his value, but other areas of his game need to be up to the standard that you need to stay in the lineup.
Yeah, and the most recent information Monty gave us about where he stands on putting Beecher in is that even though he was technically on loan to Providence and Montgomery didn't really know the logistics of it, he said Beecher is still part of the options I'm working with for game 1. So to him, it's really a Monty decision, right? Like, who does he want back? And yeah, he's gotta have to decide what he wants to value in terms of face off. And I know obviously Beecher has other attributes. He's fast. But there's more, I guess you could call Lauko a more consistent option in the bottom 3. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, he's just been doing it a little bit longer. I wish.
But his skill set is much more small. It's much more specific, right? Whereas Beecher's being a center, being able to win faceoffs can be a big asset.
Lauko's attributes is energy, physicality, and like you said, Bridget, being a pest. I desperately need somebody to work with Lauko in the offseason, because right now it's too late in the game to work on it right now. But in the offseason, he has to learn to slow the game down, in his mind, physically. He's too I get anxiety watching him. He just doesn't think the game. He just does. And the puck's off and on his stick. It's dude,
that's why he's a mosquito.
You need to which is great if you can control that though, right? The puck gets on his stick and he just, I don't know. He thinks too fast. He needs to be more methodical and slow the game down when he can, because I think it takes away from his ability to make plays.
Well, he desperately needs to work on his shot, his finishing too, because there's been times where he's been on that third line with Geekie and Frederick, and most of it actually works, and you're like, okay, he's keeping up with them, he's doing some hard work, you can see this, and then a cycle leads to him being the one that has a scoring chance, and it's right in the goalie's chest or into the pads, and it's again, fourth line, maybe you can get away with that, right? Offense isn't the biggest thing. You can just be the energy, physical forechecker guy. But like, if you're ever gonna be a third liner in the NHL on any consistent basis, you have to bury chances when you get them.
All right, guys. Before we get to predictions, I want to ask one final question on my end, and that is, who is the dark horse for the Bruins that you could predict playing a factor, an X factor in this series outside of maybe their top players? Who are you looking at? And if you guys don't have an answer off the top of your head, I guess I can give mine to buy you some time. But
I think
I've got one.
Okay.
And it's someone we've already touched on, but Kevin Shattenkirk. Like, if they give him a chance to run that top power play unit, I could see that being a difference maker. I could see him having a few points there. You know, the thing, like, just again, like the subtle things he does on the power play or 5-on-5, just getting shots through, having a tippable shot. How many deflection goals do you see in the playoffs? A ton. Like, he can set those up. So, you know, I think I'm taking a little bit of a chance here because he's not even a lock to be in the lineup. But I could definitely see him having a role to play and making a positive difference at some point.
I have to think that BU bias plays in a little bit here.
What? With me?
No, never. So yeah, my first thought, Brian, I'm laughing at now because technically this is someone on your first line, but maybe Danton Heinen. His playmaking, his ability to set up guys that you can't really call a dark horse in Pavel Zacha and David Pastrnak. Heinen is someone that I think we can all agree isn't someone you think is going to steal you a series, but he could set up those other guys to finish. And I'm not saying he, just like what Scott's saying, it's more about a guy that's going to catalyze the offense, make the right plays. In terms of this conversation, not your top end goal scorers. We're more talking about guys that are going to be the assist guys, the playmakers that set up the plays that end up scoring. So I don't know if that's a stupid answer because he's technically on the top line, but he wasn't, he's playing really well. And I don't think anyone would say like, oh, you really need Danton Heinen to play at his best to win a series against Toronto. So I think that makes him count as an answer.
How many top liners out there score at a half point per game pace, right? Not a lot. So he's a bit of a unicorn in and of himself.
And how many top liners out there were essentially walk-ons?
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. No, I think that's a great answer. I do. And because again, part of the asking who the X factor is means like it kind of insinuates it can't be a top guy, right? Well, yeah. So for Pastrnak to be a sure thing, like that means his line mates have to help him go. So definitely. There's two I kind of want to go with here, but I will go with I'll go with Jake DeBrusk. I mean, I think that depending on who you talk to, he's somebody that people expect him to perform. And others expect him to shy away and to hide. And I think depending on who's right, I think tells you who wins the series. I think Jake DeBrusk has to show up here. Whether it's against Toronto or in the playoffs in general. And I don't just mean showing up, helping the team in other areas. I specifically mean he needs to show up on the score sheet. He has to. It's unfair and it's unrealistic to expect David Pastrnak. Why does David Pastrnak have to score every single game? I know he can, and I know that that's his level of talent, but he's still a human being. It's unfair to expect Pastrnak to score every game and score and carry the team. I also am very close to calling Brad Marchand an X factor, but I can't because he's one of their best players. So I'm going to go with Jake DeBrusk. I think you need him to be a top 6 scorer for this team. This team is littered with, in my opinion, bottom 6 forwards. Okay, he can't be one of them. And I think Patrick Maroon is another fun one to talk about because quite literally he's an X factor because we haven't seen him this year besides 2 games. So I think Can he bring that swagger? Can he bring that championship experience? Can he level the playing field a bit when you have Max Domi and Ryan Reeves? Shall he play? And others out there trying to tip the scales. Don't forget, last time the Bruins played Toronto, you had Jake McCabe cross-check Brad Marchand in the next 5 minutes into the game. Sure, the Bruins get a power play and score, but you don't want that happening 7 games. And I think a guy like Pat Maroon can really help police that out there. So I think he's an X factor too. But I think Jake DeBrusk is a big one because he has all the talent in the world, and when he wants to use it, and he's really effective, and he plays well against Toronto historically.
Well, and I'm just going through like game by game some of the setups to different goals the Bruins have had against Toronto. And my God, is Pastrnak involved in like almost every goal the Bruins scored against the Leafs this year. It's crazy how many assists and goals he had in the series.
Just whispering secrets.
Can you hear me?
It was a little muffled.
I was thinking, okay, I'm sorry for the bad posture on that one, but no, Pastrnak has been involved in like so many goals, especially in the last 3 meetings with Toronto. I was trying to see, what DeBrusk did. It wasn't a whole lot, but yeah, Pasta had a big regular season series against the Maple Leafs. So
yeah,
if that carries over.
A few other guys I want to highlight, talking about the Bruins offense, are guys who are going to be playing, who really have no playoff track record, but are going to be playing by far the biggest roles they've ever played on a playoff team. Pavel Zacha, he has 0 playoff goals in 12 career playoff games. He's now one of your top 2 centers. Like, he has to step up.
Yep.
Do you know that Trent Frederick has 0 career playoff points in only 9 games because he's been a healthy scratch at times in the past?
Yeah, he was last year.
Yeah, he's not going to be a healthy scratch. He's very much a huge part of your third line. So, all right.
The 7th player award, which we didn't
indeed
mention, but
so Trent Frederick, his time to step up. How many years did we always say Charlie Coyle as the third line center was an X factor, right? And he always was one way or the other. Okay, well, your third line center this year is Morgan Geekie, who has played 24 career playoff games, scoring 2 goals. Most of that has been as a 4th liner in Carolina or Seattle. So he's now playing the biggest role he's ever played on the playoff team. Third lines can change series. He is the center of your third line. So he's going to have to step up as well.
Wow, I think, Scott, you just went through the entire team as your X factor.
I named 3 people.
No, but then you add it to ours, and it's the whole team. Not really the whole team, but it was a lot.
Those aren't like X factors. It's just guys who have to step up. Just guys who haven't really done it on this stage before.
Yeah. I was messing with you, Scott,
No,
as I normally do.
The Frederick one's a good point though, because he's been on the team since 2019, right? And 2018-2019 season, I think he may have played like, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 games. But he's yet to take part in a playoff series as a regular. Yeah, he was regularly part of your third line last year, and then the playoffs come around and he's scratched, to your point, Scott. So yeah, we haven't even had the opportunity to see Trent Frederick leave an impact on a series from start to finish. So that's a good point as well.
Yeah, he kind of found himself on the outs when because of Bertuzzi coming in.
Right.
Who, by the way, you're playing against now.
Yes, you are. So yeah, it's going to be a great series. I think there's a lot to look forward to. If people are expecting the 2013, 17, 18, 19 Leafs that get bullied out of the building, it's not going to happen. This Toronto team has a much different DNA. Like we said earlier, only 5 players remain from that team, from those teams in general, and it's their top 5 players, but they have added toughness and physicality around them. So with that said, Bridget, Scott, let's get to the predictions.
Do we want to touch on quickly just Jack Edwards?
I think we should do that at the end.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah, we'll touch on Jack at the end. Jack also might be an X factor in this series. Maybe the Bruins can play for him. So add that to Scott's list of X factors, along with the popcorn vendor and.
Well, I mean,
everybody else
hey,
that
if it goes to game 7, don't you want to be Jack Edwards' final call? Score the big goal, send him out on top.
Yeah, that's true.
Because Nesson doesn't get second round, so end of this series is that's it for Jack.
Which I wish they did. I wish they got to do the whole thing, but obviously we're used to.
Bridget, why don't we start with you, ladies first, in our predictions here?
Okay, well, I suggested that we not tell each other what our predictions were. However, apparently some people have told each other what their predictions are. I didn't tell you guys what mine is. And
I don't know anything. Only Scott does.
It's slightly changed for my own personal reasons right before the podcast, when I realized that I might not be able to go to a game 7 because I have a PWHL broadcast that day. So we're going 6 games.
If that is the schedule, we don't.
If that is it potentially, right?
Yeah. So we should mention that as of Wednesday afternoon when we're recording, we don't have the official schedule yet. We think game 1 is Saturday night at 8 p.m., but it's not actually official yet.
Yes, that is the latest word that we've gotten from Bruins. But potential for May 4th to be the game 7 game, and that would be problematic for my scheduling. So with that being said, I'm going Bruins in 6.
Okay, so that's 1 for the Bruins. I guess I'll go second because Bridget, Scott knows my pick, but I don't know Scott's pick, and I just learned about yours, so this is a surprise to me too. So my opening shift was a warning shot to fans. Please, please, please do not rely on history. Do not refer to history. This is completely different than 2013, 2018, 2019. Different teams, different coaches, different expectations, all that said. So I'm going Bruins in 7. Just like history has said. But in all seriousness, I am going Bruins in 7, but not for any of those reasons. I think the Bruins are certainly a flawed team, but you know what? Every team is flawed. I think that while Toronto, this is the best rendition of the Maple Leafs, the best version, most complete version, I think, that the Bruins have seen in any of the previous playoff series. Toronto can score. They're the highest scoring team in the NHL, and they still have 1 game to go. They're tied with Colorado, who also has 1 game to go. So, yes, they can score. They have many more goals than the Bruins, about 30 plus. But as we said off the top, their goal differential is about equal. So they give up a lot more goals. What it comes down to for me is the Bruins, they continue to break our hearts. They can, and I just ultimately, I can't give Toronto the benefit of the doubt until they show me and everybody in themselves that they can beat the Bruins and out defend the Bruins. I think Toronto's defense and their goaltending, there's just far too many question marks there. And while the Bruins have question marks up front, they're not as anemic as people make them seem offensively. So until Toronto slays the beast, I just can't give Toronto the edge. But I will say if the Bruins drew Tampa Bay in the first round, I probably would have gone Tampa for similar reasons. Until the Bruins beat Tampa, I couldn't give them the benefit of the doubt. So fortunately, the Bruins are playing Toronto. So I'm going Bees in 7.
You're killing me with your opening shift, completely contradicting your
different points.
You're killing me. No, it reminded me of, I don't know if you guys ever watched Parks and Rec, but Aziz Ansari's character at one point says, "I always tell people to take the high road, so there's more room for me on the low road." That's what you just did.
I will say, I honestly will say, like, I think that there's so much star power with Toronto's forwards, but especially when you compare it to the Bruins after Pasternak. But like, if you take away Pasternak and you take away Matthews, like, and you look at those offenses, those forward lines, it's like Toronto has more. But yeah, again, there's just I try to envision, like, can I see Toronto winning in 6? And the answer is always yes, but when it comes down to it, like, I can't go against the grain right now. I got to see it to believe it with Toronto in particular.
Scott, before we go to you, can I just add a little to my prediction? I think I'm going to predict about the goaltending that
Oh, you better not steal what I'm about to say.
Swayman is actually going to come in and play well, and we're going to finally get a chance to see him have success in the playoffs.
Okay.
You're going opposite.
So I have very real concerns about the Bruins in this series, specifically 5-on-5 defense against this Leafs offense. As a stat I've cited multiple times, the Bruins give up the most high danger chances per game of any of the 16 playoff teams. Toronto generates the third most high danger chances. That is not a formula for success. That puts a lot of pressure on your goalies. I do think the Bruins will be able to generate offense against this Leafs defense. I think they will score on Samsonov, who I don't think will hold up. Wouldn't be at all surprised if the Leafs have to make a goalie change, possibly multiple goalie changes. Unlike a Bruins rotation, out of necessity, out of product of poor play. So I worry about the Bruins defending inside against this Leafs team. I still worry about their breakouts, which was obviously an issue last year and has been an issue at times this year. But I think the Bruins have enough of an advantage in goal. And I think this is finally going to be the year where the Ullmark-Swayman tandem gets it done after 2 first-round losses the last 2 years. And I think they get it done as a rotation. I think Montgomery and Babasenza see the light, rotate goalies. I think they both play well, and the Bruins win this series in 7 games.
And when we go on Sunday skate, Razor is going to completely disagree. And I don't know necessarily if Babasenza sees the light or if Montgomery is kind of taking the lead on that. But I do think they will rotate.
No.
And I think that as just a fan of the NHL in general, I want to see it so that we have some sort of frame of reference to discuss and compare when we see it again later down the line, right? Like we want to be able to see it and compare it to if they ever tried again or if another team tries it. We want to see if it has success or it fails miserably. And they didn't do it last year, so we didn't get a chance to really analyze how it worked. So I, as just a hockey fan in general, want to see what comes of it.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating development, and people will say why don't other teams do it? Because other teams don't have that 1-2 punch that the Bruins do. So let's find out. Again, one other thing I wanted to mention as well, for Scott and my predictions to come true, the Bruins would have to win Game 7 on home ice. That means the Bruins have to be better on home ice in the playoffs. One thing I was looking at this past week, and I wrote about it on Twitter quickly, where all good journalism happens, is that the Bruins in their last. So first of all, the Bruins low key, and I'm not talking about Thor's brother, have lost 3 straight playoff series dating back to 2019, which is 2020. Was it 1 against the Islanders?
Yeah.
So they beat the Capitals, but then they lose to the Islanders, they lose to the Hurricanes, they lose to the Panthers. The last 2 playoff series, the Bruins have had home ice advantage as the higher seed. They're 2-5 in those series collectively. 1-2 against the
Carolina. What? They were on the road because the
home
team.
No. I know what I'm saying is in the last 2 playoff series where the Bruins were the higher seed.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
They're 2-5 in those series as the home team. So they went 1-2 against the Islanders at home ice and 1-3 against the Panthers. dating back to 2019 against St. Louis, so game 1 against St. Louis, the Bruins have played 16 home games at TD Garden, and they're 8-8. Obviously, there was the bubble there, but at TD Garden, they're 500 in their last 16 home games. So that has to improve. And so I just want to make that note going into this round, because they are the higher seed, and that needs to change, right? So if Scott and I want our predictions to come true, that means that they got to be better at home ice, right? So I wanted to make that comment as well before we talked about Jack.
All right, so I wrote down all of our predictions, and we will check it out. By the way, you haven't yet given the results of the poll that we put up for what?
Oh, good point.
What our viewers or our followers predicted.
Yep, good point, Bridget. So we put up this poll earlier today, which is just on the Skate Pod Twitter account, which is just predict the series. Bruins in 4-5, Bruins in 6-7, Leafs in 4-5, Leafs in 6-7. We've got just about 300 votes since then, and right now it is 79% of you think the Bruins are going to win the series overall, and 21% think the Maple Leafs are going to win the series overall. So that's
And
and
I'm
a
guessing,
lot of the predictions came in Bruins in 6 or 7.
right.
That
I
was
was
the
going to say,
majority.
I would guess that took the cake.
Yeah, 64%, which is obviously that's a pretty big margin of victory there for Bruins in 6 or 7, because nobody thinks the Leafs are gonna get swept the way they did in the regular season. I think that we haven't talked about that one time because we don't really see that happening.
Yeah, I learned my lesson on predicting sweeps last year. Well, not although I promise you at some point I will predict a sweep again, because I like to be. No one ever predicts sweeps, and like it's just this series I had to predict a long one. Like I just don't. No part of me sees it being a short series, but I feel like even when people think like one team's clearly better than the other, they still pick 6 games because it's just safe. And that
Game 7 gives people heart attacks. That's why everyone's like, we don't want Game 7. No heart attack for me this year. By the way, if Game 6 does come around, I heard some of the reporters want to rent I don't know, bus, van, and drive up. It's about 9 hours, 8.5, 9 hours to Toronto. And I hope Scott's in, because I want to annoy Scott for 8.5 hours in the car.
Well, the good news is if we get a bus, I can sit on the complete opposite end of the bus as you. So.
No, you can't. Where do you sit next to me at every game?
What, we're gonna have assigned seating on the bus? What the hell are we talking about?
Yeah, we're gonna bring the same note cards that have where we sit.
Our little placards from the press box.
Bridget and I will just be making fun of Scott in the bus. He's driving. He pulls a Chris Farley. I want to turn this bus around.
Yeah, Brian, you want to come?
Nah. I'll just watch from TV, I suppose. It would suck taking a 8-hour bus ride to watch the Bruins lose a game. Hopefully they win if we were to go. But all right, so we've pretty much beat this series to death before it starts. So we'll have to obviously we'll react in real time and whatnot. But yeah, Bridget, you mentioned, or Scott, you mentioned as well. Jack Edwards announced his retirement. Now look, it's after the season this year, which would be after the playoff coverage for the Bruins. So I'll just go quickly. I mean, Jack, I think he's one of the greatest personalities. I've always loved Jack. I think that his homerisms, his passion, it's what makes him unique. If you're not unique in that industry, then you're not great. And I remember in 2006, I think I was at a home Bruins game, when Jack was on the road and Dale was doing the home games, and Jack was sitting in front of me with his kids in the loge. And like, I just, I was a kid at the time, but I saw the human side to Jack, and people just don't realize that when you're behind the mic, it's a personality. I think that Jack was amazing. He's the voice track to my childhood and adulthood. Unfortunately, he's not able to do the job the way he himself would like to do it. And it's an unfortunate end, but it kind of has to be this way. where he can't do the job like he used to or once could because of the issue with his speech that he's addressed. But yeah, I think he's one of a kind. And when people can say that about you, you've done something right. So that's my 2 cents on Jack.
Yeah. One thing you can never ever accuse him of is not caring or not being passionate. Like, he had more passion than a lot of fans do, like, right? Like, he was the voice of the fans because of that. And I saw Andy Brickley, it was to Nesson, but I think it was either during the pregame. Our friend Gail Troiani posted the story on Nesson.com, and Brick was saying, because he, Jack helped him basically break in as color commentator. And he said, like, Jack drew that passion out of him and, like, kind of let him know, like, hey, like, it's okay to turn up the emotion. Like, it's okay to feel something. Because Brick said, like, he was always, as a player, he was always kind of quiet and understated. And he sort of quickly realized, like, all right, you can be the smartest color commentator and, have good points to make. But if you're sort of dull, like, it's not going to fly. You gotta have opinions. You gotta be passionate. That's got to come through on the broadcast. And that was never an issue for Jack. Like, he had that in spades, to the point where obviously he's, certainly from fans outside of Boston, but even among some Bruins fans, come under criticism for being too over the top. And admittedly, there's been times where I thought he was, but like, no, he called some of the most memorable seasons and moments and players in Bruins history, and left his mark. And, like, I think every player who has a big moment that has a Jack call to it, like, they're never going to forget it, like, and fans are never going to forget so many of them. So that's what you want, right? Like, yes, you have a job to do describing the action, but also, like, elevating and meeting that moment and adding to a great moment, right? Like, when great plays like the comeback against Toronto get replayed forever and ever, there's always a soundtrack, whether it's TV or radio. And in that specific case, we're fortunate that you had incredible calls on both. But Jack is the soundtrack to so many of those moments. And it sucks for anyone to have to stop doing what they're doing because they physically can't, right? They physically can't do it. There's something stopping them. And Jack has been open about that, and he referenced it in his statement last night. But yeah, unfortunately, there probably wasn't a path forward. And, now there's going to, it's good that they get this out before the playoffs, and now he kind of gets, this moment in the spotlight that he has certainly earned.
Yeah. And with the playoffs, you never know how long a series is going to go, right? So, you want to have a moment where you can, and by the way, obviously the last game of the regular season, they could focus on it more because the Bruins already, I know they didn't have the exact spot clinch, but they're already in the playoffs and whatnot. But I'll say for me, obviously my career path is as a play-by-play broadcaster. And back when I was in high school, I watched so much hockey. I would watch it while I was doing my homework. I was multitasking constantly during the 2011 playoff run. And during that whole season and obviously was listening to Jack for those games. And one of the reasons why I decided to go into play-by-play, or why I wanted to even try it in the first place, was because of how much I enjoyed just the idea of getting to talk about and be passionate about hockey and let that be my job. Because when I was trying to decide what to do in college, my dad said, just pick something that you enjoy, and you watch Jack enjoy that every single day, right? Like he said in the intro that Nesson played the other day, who has more fun than us? So it always seemed like a job that could be enjoyable if you're a big hockey fan, if you knew the players, and it gave me something to try to strive for and get to know the team. And I became obsessed with it at certain points, like wanted to know every player, where they came from. But Jack made it look like a career option that you wouldn't regret because of how much fun he had. And so I think that before I even went to college, before I even started this, he had an impact on what I do myself, you know? And obviously I have a completely different style than he does. He is much more over the top. My personality just isn't really quite that. But in a lot of ways I've learned things that work, things that maybe I don't want in my calls. Like you're never going to hear me say can of corn. There's certain phrases that they're not going to translate over to my.
How about
broadcast.
tumbling muffin?
No, there's no tumbling muffins.
Chinese mustard.
Nope, not going to hear that on one of my games. But
what's the one you like, Bridget? The coin that doesn't get tossed or something?
The coin that doesn't get tossed. If you're playing the Jack Edwards drinking game, those are all on there, or bingo or whatever. Those are all on there. But yeah, like I feel like he's the play-by-play broadcaster I've listened to the most since starting my career. So obviously you pick up stuff along the way about how to react, how to emphasize, what the moment takes in a call. And so whether or not I can pinpoint exactly what his impact on my own career has been, it's definitely there. Because that's just how I grew up was him. And one day I wanted to be an NHL play-by-play broadcaster, still do. And that kind of started with watching what he did.
Yeah, that's awesome, Bridget. I mean, if Jack, hopefully maybe you can let Jack know if you see him on the ninth floor, what he meant. I'm sure.
I have talked to Jack before. Not necessarily getting too deep into what impact he had on me, but I have talked to him about the job, path, the career path.
Yeah, I'm sure that would mean a lot to him, knowing how much he impacted people, in all sorts of ways. So yeah, obviously, congrats to Jack on that career, and he'll be missed. And we'll see. Maybe Bridget will be next in line there. So we'll see.
I don't think so. I don't think it times out for me perfectly right now. So I think that they have a few people in mind that they might be calling. I haven't got a call yet. So I do work at Andersen. So maybe I get to talk to someone. But we'll see.
It is going to be interesting to see who's next. It's obviously one of the premier broadcast jobs in the hockey world.
What about Gauche? He's probably under contract out in Vegas.
Certainly a name to watch, though.
I heard he makes a decent amount out there, and that he likes it out there.
Yeah,
I'm sure he does, but he was here for a long time, and I'm sure there's some level of pull there. But to your point, he is already in a great situation in Vegas too.
I mean, you talk about how you can make the moments right that much better. I mean, as great as Jack has been, I mean, Dave Gaucher has the most famous Bruins call in decades, which is "Get the duck boats ready," which obviously Jack didn't get the opportunity to have a call based on it being televised nationally, but on the radio side, Gaucher got to do all the games. So
and Bergeron.
Yeah, exactly. That one too. Yep. So. All right. Wow. Long episode, but necessary. It's obviously a special episode, breaking down round one. So the rest of them obviously will be quicker. But that said, Bridget, Scott, any final things to discuss before we sign out here?
No. Listen to Bridget on Thursday night, 7:00, PWHL Boston.
Yes.
Plugging my on Andersen. Okay.
Yeah. Well. It's great timing because hockey fans probably listen. That's a 4-day gap between end of the regular season and start of the playoffs. So get your hockey fix there.
And they're in the playoff push themselves. They're currently 5 points out of a playoff spot. So playoff race for them too.
I know we're not predicting every other series because we've already gone too long. I will say I was looking back at our preseason cup predictions, and I looked at mine. I was like, you know what? I can stand by that. I had Hurricanes over Oilers. I'm just gonna stick with that. Like that feels like it has as good a chance of hitting as anything.
We all had Bruins finishing second in the division.
That's true.
Scott, did you not recall my or Bridges cup picks?
Yeah, I can share those. So I think everyone might be pretty happy with their cup winners. Bridget had Avalanche over Hurricanes. And Brian, you might like your cup winner still. I don't think your Eastern Conference champ has much of a chance. You had Stars over Devils.
They might not have too much.
I think they got a tough road ahead.
All right, that wraps it up, guys. We'll talk to you. I thought I had Carolina in there, huh? Devils, huh? Oh, that's a tough look. You have to get a new co-host, guys.
It's okay. I thought Buffalo was going to make the playoffs, but they end up firing their coach instead.
Boy, oh boy, jeez.
What is it? 13 years in a row they haven't made the playoffs. It's been so long.
Yeah. Brutal.
Okay. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode. I don't want to promise anything. So we'll for now, this will probably be it until after game 1, but maybe things will change. And I guess just look out for any tweets coming your way. Maybe we'll do a quick episode or mailbag or something before game 1. But I would lean towards this being the last episode before game 1, Scott and Bridget.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why it's why we were okay going long, because as we said, Bridget's got PWHL. Friday's a busy day. I'll be at practices over at Warriors. So
I'll be on I'll be with Gresham Fourier filling in for Billy. So I'm going to force the issue to talk about Bruins, obviously, on Friday. We'll see if we can. Oh, and I'll be with Razor because
I was going to say, you got Razor in. I was on Gresham Fourier today, Wednesday. So if people haven't heard enough from me listening to this, you can also go check that out if you want.
All right. Very good. Very good. Well, thank you to Bridget and Scott for taking the extra time. Thank you to all of you listening, and we will talk to you very soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.